Good afternoon. 1 year ago today, we announced a new federal violent crime initiative to address the unprecedented level of violent crime in our cities. The initiative had three components. First, all prosecutors in this office would handle violent crime cases. Second, we would prosecute all adult violent carjackings. And third, we would form a gang unit to focus on violent gangs in Minneapolis. This afternoon, we are announcing the arrest and indictment of 45 members and associates of two violent street gangs. Over the last 48 hours, ATF and FBI agents working alongside local and federal law enforcement brought these gang members into federal custody. The defendants are charged with crimes ranging from participating in a criminal organization under RICO to using firearms in furtherance of murder and drug trafficking. Today's announcement marks a fundamental change in how we address gang violence. Starting with these charges, we are prosecuting street gangs as the criminal organizations they are. The charges we announced today are a significant step forward in our effort to reduce violent crime in Minneapolis. For the past year, we, together, have been carefully and deliberately building these cases against the criminal organizations that are Minneapolis street gangs. And this is just the first step. We will continue to bring gang cases as we dismantle them and reduce the threat they pose to our city. There are three Minneapolis-based violent gangs: the Highs, the Lows, and the Bloods. The Highs and the Lows are focused in North Minneapolis, divided by Broadway, and the Bloods operate primarily in South Minneapolis. Today, in our first set of gang indictments, we are bringing RICO and related charges against 45 members of the Highs and the Bloods. This slide summarizes the charges and the defendants in today's cases, and all of these slides will be available to the media. We have charged 28 members and associates of the Highs and 17 members and associates of the Bloods. And the defendants are charged with a long list of federal crimes, from RICO to using a firearm in relation to murder. The indictments unsealed today allege that the defendants engaged in a brutal and unrelenting trail of violence over the course of years. Violence such as revenge killings, assaults, and shootings that included the murder of innocent bystanders. Traditionally, our approach to gun violence has been to charge violent offenders crime by crime, shooting by shooting, case by case. And we will continue to do so in order to take violent offenders off the street in this manner. However, to reduce violent crime in Minneapolis dramatically, we are also addressing the unique harm violent gangs bring to our communities, and we are dismantling them. These first indictments illustrate the new shift in our approach. We are addressing gang violence for what it is: organized criminal activity. And to be clear, there will be more cases after this. The indictments allege how long each gang existed and how they operated. Starting with the Highs, they have been in existence since approximately 2008. They operate primarily on the north side of Minneapolis. The Highs is a criminal organization engaged in murder, assault, robbery, drug dealing, and firearms trafficking. There are numerous subsets of the gangs, but they're all members of the Highs. New members of the gang must, quote unquote, put in work, which generally means shoot people. Leaders are called shot callers. They congregate at businesses on the north side, and they use common phrases and hand signs. The Bloods have been in existence for decades in Minneapolis. They work primarily on the south side of the city. They, too, are a criminal organization engaged in murder, assault, robbery, drug dealing, and firearms trafficking. There are two major subsets of the Bloods, the Rolling 30s Bloods and the Outlaw Bloods. They have leaders, senior leaders, and street-level leaders. New recruits are called YGs or YGBs. At the higher level, you're called an OG, and the highest level is a double OG. YGs, new recruits, must fight, shoot, or make money for the gang, typically through drug sales. And they, too, display indicia of membership and hand signs. To prosecute the members of the gang as part of a criminal organization, we are using the Racketeering, Influenced, and Corrupt Organization Act, known as RICO. The aggregate nature of a RICO prosecution has a deeper and more lasting impact and stronger deterrence. RICO was enacted in 1970, and it was originally used to address traditional organized crime. Today, it is most often to use violent, modern-day street gangs. Let me explain briefly how RICO works. First, we established that the gang, here, the Highs and the Bloods, are a criminal or enterprise, and that members participate in that enterprise through a pattern of racketeering activity. Racketeering activity can be anything from state crimes, such as assaults, robberies, and murders, to federal violent crimes. Once we establish that the gang fits this description, all members of the gang can be prosecuted together, and all of their crimes, referred to as racketeering acts, are admissible at trial. Rather than trying one crime at a time, all violent crimes that fit the RICO statute are tried together, as are all gang members who committed any of those crimes. This is a powerful and effective tool for dismantling criminal organizations, and it carries its own set of penalties, including life in prison for gang members who commit murder. To highlight the effectiveness of RICO, here is a list of all shootings and murders included in the Highs and Bloods indictments. 20 shootings and 7 murders in just these indictments. And these are just a snapshot of gang-related shootings in our city. This long list of shootings and murders dating back 7 years demonstrates what I said earlier, that these gangs and gang members have created a brutal and unrelenting trail of violence in Minneapolis. This is the first time our office has brought a federal RICO charge against Minneapolis-based street gangs. To assist us in conducting these investigations, we reached out last year to the Organized Crime and Gang section of the Department of Justice. They are national experts in RICO and related laws, and they have been our unyielding partners throughout. And I'm proud that Assistant Attorney General Kenneth has joined us today in support of our work.
Thank you so much, U.S. Attorney Lugar. The Department of Justice has no greater responsibility and no greater priority than keeping our American people safe. But as you just heard, this city has faced an unprecedented spike in violent crime in recent years. Gangs have held this community hostage, terrorizing local residents, running their operations from local businesses, engaging in blood feuds with rival groups, all tearing at the very fabric of our society. These gangs, including the Highs and the Bloods, pose a greater danger to society than those who commit isolated incidents. These groups often have a hierarchy. They engage in long-running, bloody disputes with other gangs, and they can and indeed do recruit young, often susceptible children into their illicit ways. These organized criminal groups require an organized response from law enforcement, and that is why we are here. The criminal division and all of its resources are brought to bear. Our organized crime and gang section, also known as OCGS, is the nation's foremost experts on the federal racketeering laws, litigating cases across the country, and reviewing all RICO indictments to ensure this important statute is applied consistently. As U.S. Attorney Lugar explained, RICO is an important tool that allows the department to target not only those individuals who carry out crimes, but also to take out the group's leadership, to truly dismantle an entire criminal organization. The 2 racketeering indictments announced today, charging a total of 30 gang members and associates, allege horrific acts of violence, including the commission of 7 murders, over a dozen additional shootings, multiple robberies, trafficking in dangerous and addictive drugs like fentanyl and methamphetamine, and more. Today, we have dealt a significant blow to the street gangs of Minneapolis, and 45 defendants are now facing federal charges. I am immensely proud of the work of our OCGS trial attorneys, Brian Lynch and Ben Tonkin, who worked tirelessly to help secure these indictments. And I also commend the outstanding work of the entire OCGS team, including our Chief David Jaffe, Principal Deputy Chief Kim Dammers, Deputy Chief Kelly Pearson, and our RICO review team led by Principal Deputy Chief Doug Crow and Trial Attorney Hans Miller. This team also worked seamlessly alongside our partners here in this U.S. Attorney's Office. Indeed, this case is a textbook example of what we can accomplish when all of our components of the Department of Justice work together, shoulder to shoulder with our local partners and with other agencies. This case is also just the latest instance of how, through strategic partnerships, our criminal division is combating violent crime across this nation. Last September, I announced an initiative based in Houston, Texas, to identify the worst of the worst gangs and their members who are disproportionately responsible for violent crime in underserved communities. Working alongside the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Texas, our OCGS has surged resources and deployed its expertise, including the use of RICO charges, to tackle gangs who have terrorized communities in Houston. But make no mistake, we cannot combat violent crime through prosecution or incarceration alone. Enforcement is a tool, it is an important one, but it is not our only tool. As this city knows all too well, we must engage with the community to understand its plight and to build necessary trust, that we are here to help solve community problems, not to cause them. I am confident that through our continuing work, we can help build safer, stronger communities for us all. I'll now turn it back to our U.S. Attorney.
The ATF took the lead in our investigation of the highs, while the FBI took the lead in our investigation of the bloods. Both assigned top agents to these cases who have worked side by side with my prosecutors, with the OCGS lawyers, and with local law enforcement for almost a year. With us today to discuss the work of the ATF on these cases is ATF Director Steve Dettelbach. Steve.
Thank you, U.S. Attorney Lugar and Assistant Attorney General Polite. I have served alongside of these outstanding prosecutors for many years, and on behalf of all of ATF, I want to thank them Indeed, on behalf of all law enforcement, I want to thank them. They are both independently from each other national leaders, not just leaders here in the fight against violent crime. But together, from the perspective of ATF and our law enforcement partners, you put them and their offices together, bringing this kind of significant case. What you're looking at is a kind of prosecutorial dream team. I should say they are a dream team to the overwhelming number of law-abiding, peaceful people in Minneapolis. But for the trigger pullers, the drug dealers, and violent gang members, this partnership that you're seeing here today, state, local, federal law enforcement officer, ATF, FBI, Minneapolis Police, Sheriff's Department, everybody here, and these prosecutors, this team is a nightmare. The two gang indictments that were unsealed today represent a powerful 1-2 punch against violent crime in Minneapolis. Using the RICO statute, the indictments, including the Hayes indictment, sets out in plain terms a list of allegations that tell a scary story about gang violence in Minneapolis. Shooting after shooting, murders, drive-bys, retaliatory killings, innocent folks caught in a crossfire. The indictment lays it all out. Fentanyl, meth, other drugs, crack, as well as trafficking in firearms throughout the community. And by using the RICO law to lay out these allegations, everyone can now see that these are not isolated, separated incidents. They're part of a broader, ongoing enterprise. But before the indictments connected all these gang-related incidents, of course, the hardworking investigators had to do that. This was done using traditional investigations, but also what is called crime gun intelligence. For instance, using our e-trace ability for crime guns, using the NIBIN ballistics network, ATF can use those tools to link together different shooting incidents and identify the actual trigger pullers, the people terrorizing our community, better than ever before. We're able to work together with our partners to investigate numerous incidents and see if they're actually connected to each other. And when they are, we can focus our efforts not just on entire communities, but on those few people who are the most violent, who are actually terrorizing those communities. Because when there is severe gun violence, the broader community is actually victimized. Make no mistake, when rival gangs declare war on each other in the streets of a city, it is the innocent bystanders, it is their neighbors, the peace-loving people of Minneapolis who suffer the greatest consequences. And it is law enforcement, including the brave men and women of ATF and our partners, that must then run toward that gunfire and try to help. That's what happened here. What you see here today is a result of three basic things. First, investigators at ATF and all of these agencies using advanced investigative techniques to connect these horrible shootings and identify the most violent individuals. Second, an incredible team of prosecutors taking that investigation and using the powerful RICO law and the other legal tools they have to combat this type of gang violence, to lay out all the allegations together. And third, partnership. And the partnerships you see here in this picture, right in front of you, are the most important weapon we have to fight violent crime. I want to thank you, Chief O'Hara. I want to thank you, Sheriff Whip, and the men and women who work at the Minneapolis Police Department, at the Hennepin County Sheriff's Department, and also all the other partners, the DEA, IRS, FBI, Postal Inspection Service, Marshal Service, Hennepin County Attorney, Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, Minnesota Department of Corrections, and more. This doesn't happen without the team, and it is a great team. I want to end with two basic messages. First, a message to the good, peaceful, law-abiding people of Minneapolis. We are not done. ATF and everybody here is going to continue to stand with you and make sure that we protect and respect your rights to live in peace without having to dodge through a hail of gunfire. And next, a message to the gang members and others out there who may be committing or even thinking of committing these types of violent acts alleged in the indictments. Don't do it. The indictment today talks about shot callers, people who are bosses, they think, telling other people what violent acts to do. The indictments talk about doing the work, which means engaging in acts of violence and firearms and drug trafficking. But what you see here today tells a different story than the indictment. What you see here today is that it is actually the law-abiding people of Minneapolis who have called this shot. And it is the law enforcement community who has done the work to bring these people to justice. I will now turn the podium over to U.S. Attorney Lugar.
Senior FBI officials are all in a meeting, a high-level meeting in Washington, and could not be here today. But they have supported these cases from day one and will continue to dedicate the resources we need to bring more gang and RICO cases. One of our partners from the beginning has been the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, and it's my pleasure to introduce Hennepin County Sheriff Dewana Witt.
Good afternoon. It's important for the public to know the level of partnership and collaboration that occurs on coordinated operations such as this. Community members are sharing their concerns, their stress, and their fear around the level of violent crimes in the community. We hear you, we echo those concerns, and we are being proactive to address them. I am so proud and appreciative of the work done by our enforcement teams and our many analysts who stayed on top of the tight timelines in changing information to help make sure that these arrests were possible. I'm so grateful to our federal partners, all of you, for not only coordinating this operation, but also for the follow-through and the thoughtful and deliberate prosecutions. We are only as strong as our weakest link. From enforcement to investigation, to prosecution to sentencing, we all must work together and bring safety and justice to our communities. Our communities deserve that. We are justice partners, and we do take this extremely seriously. And as it was said before, we're going to keep going. We're going to give Minneapolis what it deserves, which is peace and justice. Thank you.
Finally, dedicated officers and investigators of the Minneapolis Police Department have been essential to this investigation. Again, working side by side with my prosecutors, the OCGS lawyers, and federal agents. From the moment he arrived in our town, Police Chief Brian O'Hara not only supported but helped drive these investigations. Chief O'Hara dealt with violent gangs in his previous job in Newark and had an uncanny ability to see what needed to be done here. He is our strong partner, and we are so fortunate to have him in our city. Chief?
Thank you, U.S. Attorney. In Minneapolis, we know that it's a small group of people who are responsible for the vast majority of violent crime that rocks our communities. It's that less than 1% of the population that is out here pulling triggers and causing immeasurable grief and harm in our communities. This extremely violent and criminal behavior, left unchecked, is a public safety and a public health crisis, with the potential to wreak havoc and impact all of our lives. The tragedy and trauma often left in the wake of these crimes threatens to destroy families, neighborhoods, and communities. Even worse, all of the available data shows that those who have been victimized are then themselves more at risk to inflict such violence upon others. The most vulnerable in our communities are often those who are most impacted on gun violence and criminal gang activity. we must use the full collective power of law enforcement to protect our most vulnerable communities. The historic indictments announced today through U.S. Attorney Andrew Lugar's leadership demonstrate our commitment to enacting proactive, intelligence-based approach that ensures that our most vulnerable residents receive the same protections and safety as everyone else in society. These indictments are removing from our communities the most prolific and most violent offenders, and in turn, preventing future violent crime from occurring. For far too long, the shootings and violence detailed in these indictments has been normalized, as has the impact and harm that is suffered by our most vulnerable residents. But let me be clear, there is absolutely nothing normal about the disgusting levels of violence and crime detailed in these complaints. It is outrageous, it is entirely unacceptable, and it will not stand. This week, the ongoing and focused work of local, state, and federal law enforcement partnerships has resulted in a resounding statement that we will not tolerate those who terrorize our communities. We will not stand by and let a small group of individuals ravage our community and threaten our neighbors. For the first time ever, Minneapolis police have embedded investigators directly in the U.S. Attorney's Office. I'm incredibly grateful for the leadership of our U.S. Attorney in making this possible. The results of this special partnership and all of our law enforcement collaborations are on display here today. I'm incredibly thankful for the dedication and hard work of agents of the FBI, ATF, and all the assistant U.S. attorneys and federal prosecutors who have worked tirelessly, early morning hours and late into the night, in order to make today possible. On behalf of the people of Minneapolis, we thank you for your incredible devotion to defending our neighborhoods. These arrests are just the beginning. The Minneapolis police will continue to have investigators embedded in the U.S. Attorney's Office. We will continue our partnerships with the FBI, ATF, BCA, Hennepin Sheriff, and all of our law enforcement and community-based partnerships, as they have proven to be an incredibly valuable force multiplier, particularly at this time of decreased staffing within the MPD. We will continue with our law enforcement partners to focus with precision on those trigger pullers who are out here causing the most harm in our communities, and we will continue to develop and pursue future cases. To be clear, if you choose to engage in this behavior, all of collective law enforcement in Minneapolis will not refrain from using the full force of the law available to hold you accountable. Today, law enforcement stands shoulder to shoulder with a strong and clear message to those who would dare terrorize our communities in this way. We will find you, we will remove you from our streets, and we will bring you to justice. Thank you.
I want to thank the DEA, the BCA, the Marshal Service, the IRS, Postal Inspection Service, and the Department of Corrections for their work on these investigations and for the safe arrests of these suspects and defendants. I also want to point out the great cooperation we have had during these investigations with the Hennepin County Attorney's Office for almost a year. 4 of my prosecutors, and as you heard, 2 prosecutors from the organized crime and gang section of the Department of Justice, worked night and day to bring these charges. From my office, they are Assistant U.S. Attorneys Sam Bates, Justin Wesley, Joe Tayrab, and Esther Mignonelli. And from OCGS, Brian Lynch and Ben Tonkin. I could not be more proud of them and the work that they have accomplished and will continue to accomplish going forward. I want to highlight something that AAG Polite said. 1 year ago, when we announced this violent crime initiative, we said that it included more than prosecution alone, as AAG Polite said. We in Minneapolis are working with national experts on a data-driven strategy called Group Violence Intervention, or GVI. Group violence, including gang violence, is a leading cause of violent crime here and nationally. GVI is a strategy to disrupt the group, here the Bloods and the Highs, through a multidisciplinary approach. Our gang cases are integral to the GVI strategy that also includes street-level intervention, community engagement, and regular meetings with gang members. As part of GVI, we are working to dissuade gang members from pursuing this lifestyle by spreading the word of all of our cases, including the cases announced today. I expect that at our next gang meeting, the main topic of conversation will be today's charges. Finally, prior to 2020, the level of violence we are experiencing in Minneapolis would have been unthinkable. Our violent crime initiative is designed to reduce violent crime dramatically to more traditional, lower levels. While other cities face chronic, high violent crime rates year after year, that is not who we are. No one should accept the violence these gangs inflict as the new normal in Minneapolis. We have an opportunity to get our city back, and all of us up here today are committed to doing our part to making that happen. I'll take some questions. I'll start with Matt Sepik.
Okay.
Because you were going to get it anyway, Matt.
You got it. So what do you think is, or what are you hearing when you talk to gang members about what's at the heart of these disputes that lead to this violence?
A lot of it's personal, traditional, and quite frankly, social media based. Reg can tell you about it. He knows all about this. We've been talking to gang members, and they're afraid of federal charges. They're afraid of RICO charges. They specifically talk about RICO. But unchecked, they engage in this unrelenting violence. Reg?
Seems like there's a war in the highs and lows. People on the north side are engaged in this. Is this signaling a stop to this war? Are you guys helping stop all the violence that's going on?
Our goal is to dismantle the gangs and to make it far more expensive for anybody, figuratively, for anybody to join a gang going forward. Lou?
Is it right that there's no charges yet against the Lowe's, and if so,
Right.
why?
That's coming next. Steve?
Could you describe the scope of weapons or drug seized?
Yeah, we're still counting the drugs and the weapons seized. We'll have more of that down the line. Yes?
I think, us in the union have heard for years that our gangs were actually not very organized, and they were loosely tied together and more like cliques and no geographical. What has changed to allow RICO to work? Are they more organized now?
Yeah, the pandemic and the follow-on to the violence after George Floyd's murder certainly brought people together in a more organized fashion and more members into the gangs.
Are these gangs at all tied to gangs in other states or other
No.
locations?
No.
We operate.
These are Minneapolis-based street gangs, yeah.
So if you're looking at a potential...
So Matt gets a second question. Steve, before Matt goes, do you have a question?
Yeah. Of these 45 suspects, how many are in custody? How many might have been arrested recently? How many were already in custody for something else?
So all but 3 are in custody. All but 2, sorry. As I spoke, 1 more got into custody. All but 2 are in custody. A number were in federal or state custody before. But over the last few days, well over a dozen, close to 2 dozen arrests were made by ATF and FBI, assisted by MPD and the sheriff and others. Yes.
Can you give us a sense of scale? How many gang members are in your database? And talk a little bit about the demographics. Are we talking about young people primarily? What age are people typically initiated? Is it, largely speaking, African-American gangs? Are there Latino gangs? Can you talk a little bit about that dimension?
So people arrested here span a number of different demographics. Recruitment starts as early as age 12. The people we are prosecuting are 18 and above. Our office has jurisdiction over adults, not juveniles. And the people charged here are 18 into their 30s. Lou?
You showed the list of shootings, the specific crimes on the screen. Since we haven't had a chance to cross-reference the dates yet, could you give us an idea if any of them are, ones that have been in the public realm? So there was like a Stonard shooting last summer, the Anaya Allen case comes to mind. Anything like that involved in this?
Yeah, that'll become obvious when you have a chance to take a look through the shootings and the dates and the locations. I'm not going to go through them all right now, but yes, they'll be recognizable.
What about,
now back to you, Matt.
What about juveniles? Are you looking at that? Is that kind of a county?
Yeah, Federal system doesn't charge juveniles. We have very limited availability to charge juveniles. That's done at the county level. Yeah.
Did you say the number of gang members in the database?
No, I avoided that question. So, good. I'm not at liberty to discuss the number of people that could face charges going forward.
What can people in these communities that are impacted by these gangs do to help you in your job?
So we've had great meetings with people in communities. We've got cooperation from people in communities. They work closely with the gang interveners on the streets. These are street level, typically former gang members who work closely with the community to stop gang violence. And most importantly, these meetings that we have had for the past year with gang members are very effective because it spreads the word. So encouraging people you know who may be in the state system on state charges to come to these meetings when they're invited is helpful. Thanks, Reg.
Without saying the number of total gang members, can you give us a better idea of how big of a slice or a swath of the gangs are wrapped into these charges?
Yeah,
like, are they high level or low level?
Both high level and low level, but we have a long way to go, Lou. We have a lot more charges to bring. One or two more? Sorry. It's a mixture. Maybe one more? It's okay if I end with Sepik? Okay.
What criteria do you look for in terms of getting RICO to stick? What criteria does a potential gang member have to fit in order for that statute to apply?
So they have to have committed racketeering acts on behalf of or to further the gang's enterprise. And so that's basically what we look for, but to bring them into a charge like this, we focus on the worst of the worst, the most violent, the drug dealers, the ones who are furthering the gang. So if you're a drug dealer but not a shooter necessarily, but you're earning money for the gang that allows it to buy more firearms, you are as culpable as the people pulling the trigger. Thank you, everybody.